Hello and welcome to my design project, and I thank you for taking the time to view my presentation. My name is Luke Butler, and this presentation is aimed to give you, the stakeholders, all the information you need about this project. Here we have the contents for the presentation. First, the introduction, where I'll be going over all the deliverables and constraints for the project. Then I will be discussing the project theme and why it's so important. I will be looking at the planning process for the project. I will be looking at what market research and technical research I carried out throughout the project. And then we'll be looking at the design work that was involved in the project and how I created the design work. And then finally, it'll be the conclusion. Okay, so the first slide is the introduction. So the project is all about brake horsepower testing and how a rig can be created to demonstrate the concepts and principles behind brake horsepower testing. So first, let's go over the deliverables. So I need to document research on brake horsepower measurements. I need to create accurate design sketches, calculations demonstrating suitability of components, appropriately dimension component drawings, selection of appropriate materials. I will possible FEA modeling to show stress variations, statements of functionality of any software required, and then we have some constraints that I need to consider also. The engineering project theme must be considered throughout the design process. The design solution should be developed according to predefined timescales, which should be documented. And I will be showing you how I achieve that later on in the presentation. The design solution should be completed within budget, and then we have some exceptions, and that is the development of software is not required. So for this project, I had a lot of the software already, and I'll be showing you what software I used later on. The building of the test rig is not required. Yes, it was not required, but I would have loved to be able to build a testing rig, and I'm going to show you later why I think that would have been a great idea. So yeah, let's move on. First is the project theme. So first, what is the project theme? A project theme is a concept or an idea that will be the focus of the project, and it will ultimately influence the decisions that I make at each stage of the project. The project theme for my project is all about digitalization, which is a very good one in the modern world. There are a few questions that I need to be asking myself throughout the project. How will the focus on digitalization influence the design specifications that I will be creating? What is the best possible way to process and use the data that we receive from the testing? Can digitalization make the testing rigs safer to operate? Can they be operated remotely? And finally, focusing deeply on digitalization can help me create the most user-friendly system possible, so our students can get the most out of our project. Okay, so next we have the planning process that I use for my project. There are several methods that can be used to plan a project. I went ahead with the Gantt chart, and there's a good visual representation of the Gantt chart on the slide. So Gantt charts are a great way to visualize the project and see each task that needs to be completed. They put the tasks into chronological order, so it is clear what tasks need to be done and in what order. I have assigned time frames to each task to keep me on track for the project deadline and ultimately to keep me on the critical path. Well, you might be asking, what is the critical path? The critical path is the order that tasks need to be completed to ensure that the project takes the shortest amount of time. So if any task takes longer than is planned, it's going to knock the critical path out of order and it's going to take longer than we expected. Next is the market research and technical research. So there is a lot of brake horsepower testing rigs on the market. They are better known as dynamometers in industry, or dynos. Dynos come in all different shapes and sizes. They can be used to test automotive vehicles. They can be used as roller brake testing for vehicles. They can be used to test electrical components such as motors, which my design is all about. And as we can see on the image, they can be used to test motorcycles also. So the principles for all the above are the same. The dyno is an instrument used to measure force, torque and power. It measures the rotational speed and torque from the engine or the motor. They are mainly used to test and find the power required to operate a motor. It can put the motor under different operational conditions, and we can observe and see how the motor reacts and get the data that we need from the tests. The market research helped me understand the different types of dynamometers and which type was more suitable for educational purposes, which is my main goal. And next we will look at what design I decided to go for. So here is my design work. First, I carried out some rough sketches of the project to brainstorm some ideas, and this was my final design I decided to go ahead with. I have a DC motor connected straight to the motor under testing, and to guard the moving parts I implemented some guarding with clear panel so students can still observe. The portable display screen will give our students all the data and information that they need from the tests. So if you look at the bottom left, you will see the guarding that I have designed. This is to protect our students from the moving shafts. And if you look at the top, you will see the eye bolts. So all of our motors will have an attachment point for an eye bolt. So if needed, mechanical aids can be used to aid safe lifting operations. It's also worth noting that adding the eye bolt will give our students the opportunity to carry out safe lifting operations, and they would also become very familiar with manual handling. I think this is just a bonus learning opportunity that we can add with our project. Okay, so here we have this is the design for the motor under test. I created the models in Fusion 360, which is a very powerful CAD software. The dimensional drawing will give the opportunity to manufacture straight from the drawings. And then finally, we have the design for the DC motor, which I will be using as our dynamometer. I picked this mainly because of its small size and portability, but can still show the principles of brake horsepower testing brilliantly. The smaller size means students can have one rig instead of all gathering around one big rig. This was coming from previous experience. I had a lot of students standing around one training aid is not that beneficial. I believe it's better to have multiple aids shared around the group to get more hands-on experience for everybody. So because our design is on a smaller scale, we can have multiple dotted around the workshop instead of having one big testing rig at the front. Okay, so the next slide is the comparison of my final design with the client's design brief and design specification. So the design brief stated I needed to create a testing rig that will demonstrate the principles of brake horsepower testing, which I believe I have achieved as my whole design is based around this. Some of the design specification that I needed to achieve for this project. First was the function. The design has simple and easy to follow operating instructions and will be provided with each product. There are not too many components to worry about. I have kept it simple for our students. Let's remember, it's all about the principles. I don't want to add any confusing parts. I want to keep it as simple as possible and demonstrate them principles brilliantly. Next is the aesthetics. The design looks modern and sleek, and the digital display will give an instant feedback from the testing rig to the students, ensuring they have all the data they need. Ergonomics. The testing rig is a small scale testing rig which will fit in most workshops and laboratories and has been designed with guarding to protect our students from moving parts. That leads us nicely onto safety. I have achieved this by implementing means of safe isolation, guarding, and having the test rig on a smaller scale makes it a lot safer compared to a big testing rig. Cost, which is a big one for a project like this, I have managed to cut costs down significantly due to the project being on a smaller scale. Smaller components and less amount of components leads to cheaper manufacturing and cheaper maintenance. Okay, so now we have arrived to the conclusion of the design. To conclude the presentation, let's look at my deliverables that were given in the original design brief and any further work that can be carried out now the project is finished. My design project made great progress in achieving most of the objectives that were set out. I fully addressed the stakeholders' requirements for a user-friendly and brilliant training aid to demonstrate the principles of brake horsepower testing to our students. I believe I have achieved a lot of the deliverables, but the evaluation that I carried out at the end has identified there are tasks that require improvements for future projects. For example, FEA modeling to show stress variations. I did not have the capability/knowledge to carry this out to the standard required, but I will certainly be educating myself on this for future projects. My CAD drawings could have been to a higher standard, but this was my first time ever using CAD software, so it was a steep learning curve for myself, but I believe I made great progress, and moving forward into future projects, I will progress even further and create even better models. It's worth noting here that a lot of my focus went onto the management of the project, and I learned a lot about managing a project, but the design, I spent less time on the design, so in the future I'm going to spend more time on the design, but I don't regret that. I learned a lot about managing a project, so I'm very happy about that. This leads me on to the next point then. I will evaluate my work throughout the project, not just at the end of the project. I will take a step back to see what is working and what is not. So yeah, not constantly evaluating caused me to waste a lot of time during the project. I made some mistakes early on that could have been identified, but I've learned from it and I'm a better person for it. So I was unable to carry out prototyping on this project due to not having the resources required, but I am already in the stage of purchasing a 3D printer so I can build prototypes for my future projects. Some of the benefits I believe in prototyping and why I'm so strongly I'm going to push to learn about prototyping. I'm going to get a 3D printer because I believe it can identify any defects or flaws in the design in the early stages of the project, which is great. It will save us time, and that's what it's all about. It can gather feedback from the stakeholders and the clients. They can actually have a physical prototype in their hands instead of looking at the 3D models, which are great, but I believe having that prototype in their hands can be absolutely brilliant. And that leads me on to it's a great way to test functionality and create a good sample of the project to send to stakeholders so they can get a good visual representation of the project. And ultimately, they can identify any things that they think could be better. And that's what we want, isn't it? We want that feedback from yourselves. That would be great. So, thank you. And in summary, the design project I think was a success. I delivered a high quality product that met most of the client's needs and the expectations of our students. I have a few areas that I need to address and I will be addressing in my future projects. This has been a great learning experience for myself and a good foundation to build on for future projects. So yeah, I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation, and if you have any questions regarding the project, please feel free to give me an email and I will help you in any way I can. So yeah, thank you. This has been Luke Butler, and thank you very much.